Greetings, YouTube. I apologize for the video being so late today, but I had a doctor's appointment this morning. Which leads me to a bit of good news. As of today, October 8th, 2010, I am no longer on insulin. Woohoo! I have gotten my blood sugar to be so normal and my A1C so low that my doctor is concerned that I may actually be putting myself in danger of a brittle diabetic dip. Like my blood sugar may crash precipitously without warning. So off the insulin, I will remain on oral medication, and we're going to see what happens. So I shouldn't have to stab myself in the leg with a needle anymore, which would be a good thing. Today I'm going to review a couple of monster books, the first being the Book of Beasts, which is a free download. I will find the link for it and post it. And it is, this is the 4th edition of this book, and it's designed for the 3.5 rules. Now, some of the people involved in this are actually big names. Monty Cook and Sean Reynolds both have monsters in this book. Most of them, however, are slightly less well-known people, but it's some very solid work in here. I'm going to give you a quick rundown of some of the monsters in the book. The Arcanus Watcher, which is kind of a combination of a dingo-like creature, 4-body, and then a wallaby. And it's designed to be a helper to an arcane caster. The ability to see, true seeing kind of thing, because they can see if someone is sneaking in. So they're a helpful watchdog kind of thing. Not overly powerful, but just there to make noise and make sure that the person that lives in that residence knows that someone is sneaking up on them. I thought they were kind of cute, kind of nicely done. We have a brownie, a nice version of the classic little helpful spirit, which was kind of cool. The Butterfay, which is a very small fay with butterfly wings. Very classic concept, and I don't know if I've ever seen it before statted out. Where is it in here? It's a Crypt something or other. Yeah, Crypt Curse, which I believe is Monty Cook's, which is a nice undead guardian. Then some dinosaurs, Diplodocus, Iguanodon, Stegosaurus, the Dire Sturge. Just in case your Sturges weren't bad enough, now you've got a dire version. Shadow Elf, which is, we always use another version of elves, right? Maybe not. But, some people like variety. There you go, more variety. Flesh-bound vampire, which is a vampire which is completely organic, yet has certain vampire traits. So if you want to something that's more near dark than Dracula, that might be what you're looking for here. Rust Giant, which is a giant based around the concept of having a negative effect on metals. Sea Giant, kind of half giant, half shark kind of thing, which is kind of cool. The Tome Golem was very cool. It's a giant book, like 5 feet by 3 feet, and like, a foot thick, that opens itself up and flaps around the room, trying to protect the library it's been put in charge of. I thought that was kind of nice, especially if you're a person who owns a library, such as myself. Having that kind of thing around might be very helpful. A Grave Sprite, which is a fae which defends a gravesite. Half arachnid, half incarnate, and half Medusa, all templates. The Hind, which is a type of gnoll. Incarnate, full-blooded incarnate, lawful, kind of powerful archetypal creatures. The Lhasa, L-A-S-A, which is a protecting spirit. The Lesser Hag, which is a template to turn another humanoid creature into something not quite as powerful as a full-blown hag, but, which still has some very hag-like classic characteristics. The Living Sword. This was an excellent idea. Taking the Dancing Sword and Intelligent Sword concepts to their next logical step. So it's a sword that has its own ability to move, it flies around, it can attack on its own, but it's a sword. it can't manipulate items, so it's going to want to team up with somebody. I could see this as a sword teaming up with like a low-level commoner or something, so that people think the commoner is using the weapon, hiding the fact that it is an intelligent flying weapon. That's a very cool concept, a great idea for a single campaign or a story, like a fictional story. Greater lizard folk. Now this is interesting because they're bigger, tougher lizard folk, but they're known for using slings and maces. Now they're semi-aquatic. Neither a sling or a mace can be used underwater. I thought that was strange. Now both a sling and a mace are simple weapons. If you want to keep this simple weapon proficiency, which would make sense, I would go with spear. I think a spear would be a good version to go with because you can use those both underwater and above the water. I don't quite grasp why they chose mace and sling. That kind of seemed weird to me. A maw, an extra-dimensional being that shows up in our universe, the material plane, as nothing but a giant mouth that just flies through the air, consuming everything it tries to get near. We got in here a nubbling, cute little adorable creature, which to me sounds a whole lot like an Ewok. Of course, you can actually get the Ewok out of the Ultimate Aliens Anthology for Star Wars D20, but this is a nice free version in case you don't have that book. Sea nymph, because you can always have more nymphs in the world. Some orcs, ebony orcs, pygmy orcs, and swamp orcs. Now, swamp orcs already exist in the SRD, so I think that may be a little superfluous. Pygmy orcs? We have goblins. What do we need pygmy orcs for? Ebony orcs, they're passably different at least. The Vulcan rat, a fire-based elemental rat creature. Rock lizard, which is again an elemental creature. The rust fiend, which is a bigger, nastier version of a rust monster, which is going to put the fear of God into anyone who's got any kind of armor. And you have allowed rust monsters to go after things like mithril and adamantine, or do they harm it at all? Or does it take longer? Just a question. A schnoz, which is kind of comical because it kind of looks like a giant nose. But I guess, every game has to have some kind of humorous slant. A smoke snake, which is kind of from the elemental plane of smoke. It's kind of interesting. Fire sprite, or fey, this from the elemental plane of fire. Very dangerous because even though it may not in itself want to harm creatures, anything it touches bursts into flame. Could be comical if it suddenly decides one day it really likes you. Thermic elemental, which is a heat-based elemental, not necessarily fire, but heat-based, which is kind of interesting. Tunnel trolls, which is an underground small version of a troll, which could be very useful for making the lives of dwarves or gnomes miserable. A template for two-headed mutants. I think there's a version of that in some official Wizards book, but this is a free version that you could use in your game if you don't have that book. A version of the Wendigo, so in case you'd like to have your own version of the Wendigo, you don't want to have to use the Wizards of the Coast version, here you go. The worm mass, kind of a swarm of worms, which is kind of creepy in and of itself. Then there's some creatures which all come from an elemental prison plane called the Gaul, G-A-O-L, and they're fairly tough, a little higher CR than your average creatures, but all themed together to be from this plane. Kind of interesting. And they have some science fiction creatures in here. The Borog, which is kind of a humanoid boar. The Cyber Cube, which is a magical, essentially, computer. Out to take over the world, of course. What else we got here? The LGM, which stands for Little Green Men. Neanderthal, though I think the Frostburn version of the Neanderthal is superior. The Tanker, which is a very tough kind of humanoid fighter type, genetically engineered for combat kind of thing. Then we have some animals, some of which are from the actual historical, prehistory kind of thing. Cave lion, there is a megalodon, just giant shark. The Glyptodon, which is a mammalian version of the Ankylosaurus. The Irish elk, very large elk. Version of the Smilodon and the woolly mammoth. And we have some vermin, giant crustaceans, giant tiger beetle, gloomfly, and heart eater, which is kind of nasty. Then we have a section in the back, and this is from the Dire Animals from the Tome of Horrors, an update to 3.5 from the Necromancer Games. Now, I don't know if this is still available online. I could not find a copy at a later date, but it's a small document, and if you want a copy, it was legally available at one time. Just contact me. They have a dire hippo, a dire deer, a dire elephant, a dire moose. That's kind of cool. Moose are dangerous enough as there is. The dire ram, which would make an excellent steed because they're large. There's a dire goat in here that would make an excellent steed for a small creature. The dire sloth, and quite frankly, that seems a little absurd, but you know, what do you want? They also have a dire dog. You know, I thought that at least thematically, all dire animals are supposed to be hearkening back to an earlier version of a real-world animal. Like a dire wolf is supposed to be a larger, tougher version of a modern wolf. No problem. So wouldn't a dire dog just be a wolf? But they're 3-hit dice, fairly tough. I think they would be very good as, say, orc or gnoll or hobgoblin beasts of war, you know, the kind of thing you send in to roust the enemy before you attack. Or even they could be used as war mounts for halflings or gnomes. That would be an excellent choice. So these are both free items available out there. They're very useful. I think that anybody could find something in them to use in your campaign. I know I had a number of ideas just by reading through the book. Though I have to admit, reading an entire book of monsters really gets kind of... everything starts to bleed together on you after you do it for a couple of days, because it took me like a week to get my way through this. But it's an excellent source, and I hope that you find some use out of it.